My wicked sister messaged, "I sold our family beach home for $5 million. You're abroad. Lucky me." But when buyer began renovating it, my legal name was on all official documents. The sheriff called her, "Ma'am, you're arrested for serious financial fraud." The true owner just returned home. A single text message received 6,000 miles away while I slept didn't just break my heart, it tore my entire family limb from limb. The sender? My own sister, Sarah, with a betrayal so casual, so profound, it made me question everything I thought I knew about her. It was 3:47 a.m., Tokyo time. My hotel room was a quiet, temporary sanctuary, the city's distant hum a soothing lullaby. I'd been pouring my soul into an architectural restoration project for 6 months, utterly immersed, believing life back home was stable. Then my phone buzzed, cutting through the silence. It was Sarah. Her message lit up the screen with an audacity that made my blood run cold. "Closed on the beach house today. $5.2 million cash offer. Split it with mom and dad already. Thanks for being halfway around the world and unreachable. LOL. Don't worry. I'll wire you $500,000 when you get back. Consider it a finder's fee for staying out of the way." My hands started shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. I read it once, then again, then a third time, each word a fresh wound. Was this some sick joke? Was it even real? The sheer, brazen theft of it all. This wasn't just a house. The Outer Banks property was the beating heart of our family. 42 years of memories were etched into its weathered cedar walls. Arthur, my dad, bought it in '82 when Sarah was 5. I was still a dream my parents hadn't quite figured out yet. Every single summer of my childhood, every scraped knee, every elaborate sandcastle built, every sunset shared, it all happened within those walls. It was our anchor. 7 years ago, when Dad's Alzheimer's diagnosis came through, Mom, Eleanor, had insisted I sign the deed transfer papers. She wanted to protect it, to ensure the house wouldn't get tangled in potential medical debt or estate complications. Dad's lucid moments were already rare, and they just wanted their affairs simplified. Sarah knew all of this. She'd been there in the lawyer's office, openly furious that I, Emily Hayes, was named sole owner instead of the property being split between us. Our parents had patiently explained their reasoning. I was the one who'd been handling their finances for a decade, managing their medical care, flying home every 6 weeks to make sure they weren't drowning in paperwork and prescriptions. Sarah, on the other hand, had moved to Charleston after college and visited maybe twice a year if we were lucky. But $5 million, it seemed, erased whatever understanding she'd pretended to have back then. My fingers flew across the keypad, dialing the number for David Miller, our family attorney in North Carolina. He'd handled every property transaction for my parents since the '80s. His secretary answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Miller and Associates. How may I direct your call?" "This is Emily Hayes," I managed, my voice tight with a fear I was desperately trying to suppress. "I need to speak with David immediately. It's about the Kitty Hawk property." The line went silent. Not a click, not a breath, just 3 agonizing seconds of dead air. Then, "Miss Hayes, Mr. Miller has been trying to reach you for 2 days. Please hold." David picked up before the hold music could even finish its first loop. "Emily, thank God. Where are you? Tokyo? What is happening with the beach house?" I practically bit out, my heart pounding. His exhale crackled through the international connection. It was a sound of pure relief mixed with dread. "Your sister showed up at my office last Tuesday with a man claiming to be you, by a power of attorney. Except I'd never seen the supposed power of attorney document before, and the notary stamp was from a county that doesn't exist. I refused to process anything. She left, threatening to find another attorney who would. She just texted me," I interrupted, my voice barely a whisper. "She said she already sold it." A pause. She couldn't have. Not legally. I heard paper shuffling, the frantic rustle of legal documents. But I did some checking after she left. Someone filed fraudulent transfer documents with the Register of Deeds. The signature, "Emily, it's a laughable forgery of yours." I've already contacted the district attorney's office. Who bought it? The question felt like lead in my mouth. A couple from Virginia, the Petersons. They wired the money to an escrow account that Sarah somehow set up using fake documentation. The escrow company is small, barely established. I'm guessing she specifically chose them because they wouldn't scrutinize the paperwork too carefully. My jet lag, the exhaustion from months of intense work, it all evaporated, replaced by the crystal clarity that comes from pure, unadulterated rage. Can the sale be reversed? It'll be messy, but yes, the deed transfer is fraudulent, which means it's void. The Petersons will get their money back, but they're understandably furious. David's tone shifted, dropping lower, heavy with implications. And Emily, your sister, could face serious criminal charges. Wire fraud, forgery, real estate fraud. We're talking federal crimes. Good, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. It wasn't about vengeance. Not entirely. It was about a line being crossed, a betrayal so deep it demanded consequences. I hung up, then immediately booked a flight home. 16 hours later, I was driving my rental car from Norfolk International Airport straight to the Dare County Sheriff's Office. Detective Laura Collins met me in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. She was 50-ish, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had clearly seen every variety of human stupidity. Miss Hayes, thank you for coming in so quickly. She slid a folder across the table. We've been building a case since your attorney contacted us. The documentation your sister filed is amateur at best. The notary she claimed witnessed your signature doesn't exist. The address listed on the power of attorney is a UPS store. She didn't even bother to match the paper quality or ink type on the original deed. I opened the folder. Photocopies of my forged signature stared back at me, each one wildly inconsistent with the next. Sarah had apparently tried multiple times before settling on something that looked vaguely like my handwriting. It was pathetic. Insulting, even. Where is she now? I asked, my voice flat. Charleston. We've coordinated with South Carolina authorities. They're waiting for you to file a formal complaint before making an arrest. Then consider it filed. Detective Collins smiled grimly. I was hoping you'd say that. The complaint took 40 minutes to complete. Every detail had to be precise, documented, legally airtight. I signed my actual signature so many times my hand cramped, each one a sharp contrast to Sarah's pathetic forgeries. What happens next? I asked, looking up from the stack of papers. Charleston PD will execute an arrest warrant within 24 hours. She'll be extradited here to face charges. Given the dollar amount and the interstate nature of the fraud, federal prosecutors might get involved. Detective Collins tapped the folder. Your sister is looking at 5 to 7 years minimum if convicted. The satisfaction I expected didn't arrive. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that once made us sisters and left only this legal skeleton. I drove to the beach house next. The for sale sign was gone, replaced by construction barriers and a lockbox on the front door. I had my own key, the original from when Dad first bought the place. It still fit inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it the previous summer. The kitchen still had Mom's collection of lighthouse mugs. Dad's reading chair sat by the window overlooking the dunes, his scent still faintly clinging to the worn fabric. Sarah hadn't bothered to clear out any of the personal items before selling. She just wanted the money. I walked through the quiet rooms, each one a gallery of ghosts, of laughter and whispered secrets. I found the file cabinet in the upstairs office where I kept copies of every property document, birth certificates, tax records, insurance policies, the original deed with Dad's signature from 1982. Everything that proved this house had been loved and maintained and legally transferred through proper channels. My phone buzzed. Mom's number. Emily, honey, I don't understand what's happening. Her voice was thin, scared, laced with the kind of panicked bewilderment that tears at your soul. Sarah called me crying, saying, "You're trying to have her arrested over some misunderstanding about the beach house." It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. She forged my signature and illegally sold property that belongs to me. She committed fraud. But she said you both owned it, that you were being selfish, keeping it all to yourself while you were overseas. The betrayal carved deeper, a fresh wound over an old scar. Mom, you were there when I signed the deed. You asked me to take ownership so it wouldn't complicate Dad's medical situation. Sarah was furious about it then, and apparently she's been planning this ever since. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything that had broken in our family over the past decade. Dad's slow disappearance into Alzheimer's fog. Sarah's festering resentment that I'd become the reliable daughter by default. Mom's exhaustion trying to keep peace between us. She's still your sister, Mom finally whispered a plea. She stopped being my sister when she stole from me. My voice cracked despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't let this go. What she did was criminal. I hung up before she could respond, hating how much it hurt to disappoint her, hating even more that she couldn't see Sarah for who she truly was. The Petersons showed up while I was still at the house. I heard their car in the driveway, doors slamming with enough force to rattle the windows. The woman who knocked was in her 60s, well-dressed, with a kind of incandescent rage that comes from discovering you've been scammed out of your retirement savings. Are you Emily Hayes? She demanded, her voice sharp. I am Brenda Peterson. My husband and I bought this house. Except now we're being told the sale was fraudulent and we might not get our money back for months. I'm so sorry. The apology felt inadequate, a flimsy bandage over a gaping wound, but it was necessary. I didn't know my sister was planning this. I was out of the country and she forged my signature on every document. The sale is void. Brenda's husband, Mark, joined her on the porch, looking equally furious. We sold our house in Virginia Beach to afford this place. We're supposed to close on a condo next week, and now we don't have the capital because it's tied up in legal limbo. The escrow company should release your funds once the fraud investigation confirms the deed transfer was illegal, I said, trying to sound reassuring. My attorney is working to expedite that process. That isn't good enough. Brenda snapped, her voice breaking. We trusted the process. We trusted the realtor, the escrow company, the paperwork. How are we supposed to know someone's criminal sister was running a con? She was right, and I had no defense to offer. Sarah had created a disaster that hurt innocent people, and I was left cleaning up the wreckage. I'll do everything I can to make sure you're compensated for any losses, I said quietly. Legal fees, temporary housing costs, whatever the fraud caused. It's not your fault you got caught in this. Brenda's expression softened slightly, the rage dimming to a deep sadness. We just wanted a beach house, somewhere to retire, watch our grandkids play in the surf. Is that so much to ask? No, I said, looking out at the ocean that had cradled my own childhood dreams. And when this is resolved, if you still want to buy it, I'll sell it to you at a fair price. No games, no complications, I promise. They left looking marginally less angry, which was the best I could hope for under the circumstances. Sarah was arrested 3 days later at her Charleston apartment. I wasn't there, but Detective Collins called to tell me how it went down. Apparently, Sarah had tried to claim she had verbal permission for me to sell the house, that we discussed it before I left for Japan, that the whole thing was a sibling miscommunication blown out of proportion. She's sticking to that story? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping me. For now. Her attorney will probably advise her differently once he sees the evidence. Detective Collins paused. She posted bail this morning. $250,000. Where did she get that kind of money? Probably from the $5 million she stole. The escrow account was frozen, but she'd already transferred portions to various accounts. We're tracking it all down, but she had access to at least $500,000 before we shut everything down. So, Sarah had spent my money to bail herself out of jail for stealing my property. The irony was almost funny if it hadn't been so utterly soul-crushing. The preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom's gallery section, watching my sister stand before a judge in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. She'd lost weight, her always perfect hair limp and unstyled. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the machinery of justice grinding into motion around her. The prosecutor laid out the charges with clinical precision: forgery in the first degree, wire fraud, real estate fraud, identity theft. Each count carried potential prison time, stacking into years that could consume what remained of Sarah's 30s. Her attorney, a sharp-dressed man from a Charleston firm, argued for dismissal, trying to paint it as a family dispute rather than criminal intent. Your Honor, this is fundamentally a disagreement between sisters about jointly owned property. My client believed she had implicit permission to handle the sale while her sister was overseas. There's no criminal intent here, simply poor communication. The prosecutor demolished that argument in under 3 minutes. The property was not jointly owned, Your Honor. The deed clearly lists Emily Hayes as sole owner. The defendant knew this, as evidenced by the elaborate forgery scheme she orchestrated. She created fake notary documents, forged her sister's signature multiple times, and established a fraudulent escrow account specifically to steal $5 million. This was premeditated fraud, not a family misunderstanding. The judge ruled that the case would proceed to trial. Sarah's bail was maintained, and she walked out of the courtroom without looking at me once. Mom called that night. Are you happy now? Your sister might go to prison because of you. Because of her choices, Mom. I didn't forge anything. I didn't steal anything. She did this to herself. She made a mistake. Families forgive mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting to call on someone's birthday, I said, the exhaustion making me blunt, harsh. Committing multiple felonies to steal millions of dollars isn't a mistake. It's a crime. When did you become so cold? Mom's voice broke. I raised you to be better than this. You raised me to be honest and responsible. Sarah clearly learned different lessons. She hung up on me. I sat alone in my hotel room, watching the news coverage of the arrest on my laptop. Apparently, a realtor's daughter committing real estate fraud was newsworthy enough for the local Charleston stations. Sarah's mugshot flashed across the screen while a reporter detailed the charges. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Carol wanted to know if I was really sending my own sister to prison over a house. Cousin Kevin thought I should drop the charges and handle it privately. Uncle George suggested family therapy instead of prosecution. I blocked them all. David Miller called with updates as the legal process ground forward. The Petersons' money had been returned, though they decided not to pursue purchasing the house after everything that had happened. The escrow company was facing its own legal troubles for failing to properly verify the documentation. Sarah had hired a forensic accountant to try proving she'd contributed financially to the house's maintenance over the years, hoping to establish some ownership claim. She's going to lose, David said flatly. Every maintenance payment went through your accounts. Every tax payment has your name on it. She hasn't contributed $1 to that property in 7 years. What's her defense strategy? Desperation, mostly. Her attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal, reduce charges in exchange for full restitution and a guilty plea. The prosecutor is considering it, but only if she serves at least 3 years. 3 years. It felt simultaneously too long and not long enough. Too long because she was still my sister, and some part of me remembered teaching her to ride a bike, braiding her hair before school dances. Not long enough because she tried to steal everything our family built. Consequences be damned, I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. Tell the prosecutor I'll support whatever outcome ensures she faces meaningful accountability. But I won't ask for leniency. She knew exactly what she was doing. The trial was scheduled for September, 6 months after Sarah's arrest. I flew back from Tokyo permanently, taking a position with an architectural firm in Raleigh so I could be closer to everything that was unraveling. The beach house sat empty while legal proceedings dragged forward. I drove out there every few weeks, checking for storm damage and making sure the place hadn't been vandalized. Walking through those rooms felt like visiting a museum of my childhood. Every corner held memories that Sarah had tried to monetize. Dad died in July, his Alzheimer's finally erasing everything that made him himself. He never understood what Sarah had done, which was probably a mercy. Mom didn't speak to me at the funeral. She stood across the cemetery beside Sarah, both of them dressed in black, united in their belief that I was the villain of the story. I scattered Dad's ashes in the ocean behind the beach house, alone except for the gulls and the waves. He would have been heartbroken to know his daughters had destroyed each other over property and money and pride. Or maybe he would have understood that families fracture under pressure, that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that love sometimes isn't enough to overcome fundamental differences in character. Sarah's attorney filed motion after motion trying to delay the trial. He claimed new evidence, requested forensic analysis of the signatures, argued for venue changes. Each motion was denied, but they bought her time. Time she used to launch a social media campaign painting herself as the victim. Her friends shared posts about greedy siblings who weaponized the legal system, about family disputes that should never involve police. Anonymous accounts left comments on my firm's social media pages, calling me vindictive, cold-hearted, a disgrace to sisterhood. Someone even created a GoFundMe for Sarah's legal defense that raised $40,000 before the platform shut it down for violating terms of service regarding criminal activity. My boss called me into his office after a potential client mentioned seeing the negative comments. "Emily, I need to know this won't affect your work here." "It won't, I promised. My sister committed fraud. I'm the victim. Her truth will come out at trial." He nodded slowly, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Just keep your head down and let the legal system handle it." But keeping my head down became impossible when Sarah gave an interview to a Charleston lifestyle magazine. The article painted a sympathetic portrait of a struggling sister who'd only wanted to help her family by selling an unused vacation property. She claimed I'd abandoned our parents during Dad's illness, that she'd been the one managing their care while I gallivanted around Asia, pursuing my career. The lies were so blatant that I initially laughed reading them. Then I realized people who didn't know our family history might actually believe her version of events. David advised against responding publicly. Don't engage with her narrative. The courtroom is where truth matters, not magazine articles. Still, the article stung. Friends from college reached out with careful, probing questions about whether there was more to the story than they'd heard. Extended family members called, asking why I was putting Sarah through this ordeal over a simple misunderstanding. Even my own colleagues at the firm started treating me differently. Conversations stopped when I entered break rooms. Invitations to after-work drinks mysteriously drying up. The isolation was suffocating. I'd become the villain in a story where I was actually the victim, and correcting that narrative felt like trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon. My personal attorney, Michael Chin, I hired him separately from David to handle personal matters, suggested documenting everything. Keep records of every conversation, every message, every interaction with your sister or anyone connected to her case. If she's building a public defense based on lies, we need to be able to counter with facts. I spent evenings compiling evidence of my involvement in our parents' care, medical appointment records showing I'd accompanied Dad to 70% of his neurology visits, bank statements proving I'd paid for his medications and in-home care services, emails to Sarah begging her to visit more often, to help shoulder the burden, to be present for Mom who was drowning under the weight of watching her husband disappear. The evidence painted a clear picture that contradicted everything Sarah claimed publicly. But facts don't spread as quickly as emotionally resonant lies. And her victim narrative had already taken root in too many minds. 3 weeks before trial, someone threw a brick through my apartment window. The attached note read, "Family comes first, you selfish witch." The police took a report, but said there wasn't much they could do without witnesses or security footage. I cleaned up the glass myself, hands shaking, wondering how far Sarah's supporters would go to punish me for pursuing justice. Detective Collins called the next day after hearing about the vandalism. "I can't prove this is connected to your sister's case, but I'd recommend varying your routine. Different routes to work, different times. Just be cautious." Living in fear because I'd refused to let my sister steal from me felt profoundly wrong. But I followed the detective's advice, checking my car for tampering before driving, looking over my shoulder in parking lots, avoiding posting anything on social media that might reveal my location. The week before trial, Sarah's attorney made one final attempt at a plea deal. He offered full restitution, 5 years probation, and a public apology in exchange for dropping the felony charges. The prosecutor called to get my input. "It's your case ultimately. If you want to accept the deal, I'll recommend it to the judge." I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. No deal. She needs to face the full consequences of what she did. Are you sure? Trials can be unpredictable. There's a chance, however small, that she could be acquitted. I'm sure. If the jury acquits her despite overwhelming evidence, I'll accept that. But I won't let her escape accountability just because going to trial is uncomfortable. The prosecutor sounded almost pleased. All right then. We go to trial on Monday. The trial lasted 4 days. I testified on the second day, walking the jury through every document Sarah had forged, every lie she'd constructed, every deliberate step she'd taken to commit fraud. Her attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, a sister who'd hoarded family property and refused to share the wealth. Isn't it true you could have sold the house years ago and split the proceeds with your sister? He asked during cross-examination. I could have, I agreed, looking him straight in the eye. But the house wasn't mine to sell casually. It was a family legacy, a place our parents wanted preserved. I was the legal owner with the responsibility to maintain it, not liquidate it for quick cash. A responsibility you took very seriously. Seriously enough to have your own sister arrested. I had her arrested because she committed multiple felonies. If a stranger had forged my signature and stolen my property, there wouldn't be any question about prosecution. The fact that she's my sister doesn't give her permission to break the law. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Sarah was convicted on all counts. Sentencing happened 3 weeks later. The judge acknowledged her lack of prior criminal history, but emphasized the calculated nature of her crimes. 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay full restitution for all legal fees and financial damages caused by the fraud. Sarah cried through the entire sentencing hearing. Mom sobbed in the gallery. I sat stone-faced, feeling nothing except the weight of inevitability, a profound emptiness where I thought satisfaction might be. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if I had any statement. I paused on the steps, considering what to say to cameras that would broadcast my words across the state. My sister made choices that hurt a lot of people, including herself. I hope she uses this time to understand why those choices were wrong. That's all I have to say. The Petersons called me 2 months after Sarah's sentencing. Brenda's voice was gentler than during our previous conversation, the anger burned away by time and resolution. We wanted to thank you, she said, for handling everything properly. We got our full refund, and the escrow company compensated us for the delays and stress. You could have disappeared and left us to fight it out in court, but you didn't. It was the least I could do, I replied. None of this was your fault. We've been thinking, her husband Mark chimed in on speakerphone. If you still want to sell the house, we'd like to make an offer, a real one this time. Done the right way. The proposal surprised me. After everything they'd been through, I'd assumed they wanted nothing to do with the property or anyone connected to it. I appreciate that, I said slowly. But are you sure? This house has a lot of bad memories attached now. Houses don't have memories, Brenda said, her voice warm. People do. And we still want that beach retirement we planned. If you're willing to sell to us at a fair price, we'd love to give that place the happy ending it deserves. We negotiated over the following weeks. I had the house appraised independently. They brought in their own inspector. We agreed on a price that satisfied everyone. The closing happened in April, exactly 1 year after Sarah's arrest. Standing in the empty beach house for the last time, I said goodbye to every memory those walls contained. Dad teaching me to cook pancakes in that kitchen. Mom's laughter echoing from the porch during sunset cocktail hours. Sarah and I building elaborate sandcastles that the tide always claimed by morning, back when we still liked each other. The house wasn't the problem. We were. And selling it felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for decades. The sale price was fair, properly documented, legally unimpeachable. I donated a portion to Alzheimer's research in Dad's name and put the rest into investments that would fund my future without requiring me to steal from anyone. The aftermath of Sarah's conviction continued to ripple through my life. Her friends organized protests, news crews wanted statements, and I remained the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. I stopped answering unknown numbers, stopped checking social media entirely. My world contracted to work and the quiet apartment where I lived alone with the weight of what I'd done settling into my bones. Except I hadn't done anything. Sarah had committed the crimes. I'd simply refused to be complicit in covering them up. But guilt doesn't care about logic. And some nights I lay awake wondering if I could have handled things differently. David assured me there wasn't another way. She stole $5 million, Emily. There's no slap on the wrist penalty for that level of fraud. You did the right thing. The right thing felt lonely. My colleague Lisa was one of the few people who stood by me through everything. She'd bring coffee to my desk on particularly difficult days, sit with me during lunch breaks when everyone else suddenly had other plans, listen when I needed to vent about the latest horrible message someone had sent. People love a redemption story, she said one afternoon, watching me delete another email accusing me of being heartless. Your sister positioned herself as the underdog fighting against her cruel sister. That narrative is compelling, even when it's completely false. How do I fight it? I asked, feeling utterly defeated. You don't. You let the truth exist and wait for people to catch up to it. Eventually, they will. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I appreciated the sentiment. Mom sent me a single text after the Petersons' purchase closed. I hope you can live with what you've done. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on the truth. I can. Can Sarah say the same? She never replied. 3 years into Sarah's sentence, I received a letter forwarded through David Miller's office. Her handwriting was neater than I remembered. Each word carefully formed, like she'd drafted this 100 times before committing pen to paper. Emily, I know you probably won't believe this, and I don't blame you, but I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. I deserve the consequences. Sorry for what I tried to take from you. Sorry for betraying the trust our parents built into that house. Sorry for choosing greed over family. Prison gives you a lot of time to think about who you've become. I didn't like what I saw when I finally looked. Honestly, the jealousy started long before the beach house. You were always the responsible one, the daughter who showed up, who handled things. I resented that instead of trying to be better. When I saw the opportunity to take something you valued, I convinced myself I deserved it somehow. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't forgive me either, but I wanted you to know that you were right to prosecute. Someone needed to force me to face what I'd become, and you were the only one willing to do it. Take care of yourself. You always were the stronger sister. Sarah. I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation or a hidden agenda. But it read like genuine remorse, the kind that only comes from genuine consequences finally breaking through denial. I didn't write back. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with apologies alone. But I kept the letter in my desk drawer, a reminder that accountability sometimes looks like cruelty from certain angles, but remains necessary regardless. The family that bought the beach house sent me a Christmas card last year. Their kids were building sandcastles in the photo. The house's weathered cedar walls glowed golden in the sunset light behind them. They had repainted the shutters and added a new deck, but the bones of the place remained unchanged. It wasn't mine anymore, but it was loved. That counted for something. Mom died last spring, her heart finally giving out after years of stress and grief had worn it down. Sarah was allowed to attend the funeral under guard, wearing ankle monitors beneath her black dress. We didn't speak. We stood on opposite sides of the grave, mourning the same woman while inhabiting completely different versions of the past. After the service, Sarah approached me while her guards waited at a respectful distance. She'd aged in prison, lines deepening around her eyes and mouth. 47 looked closer to 60 after years behind bars. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. She was my mother, too. I nodded, accepting the boundary in those words. The house looks good. I saw the pictures online. The new owners are taking good care of it. That's good. Dad would be happy about that. She hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. I have 18 months left. When I get out, I'm moving to Oregon, starting completely over where nobody knows what I did. That's probably smart. She glanced at her guards. Time was running short. I really am sorry, Emily. For all of it. I know, I said, and discovered I meant it. But sorry doesn't fix what broke between us. No, it doesn't. Sarah's eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. Goodbye, Emily. Goodbye. I watched her walk back to the guards, disappear into their custody, return to the prison that became her home because she chose theft over honesty. Part of me still mourned the sister she could have been if she'd made different choices. But mostly, I felt the quiet peace that comes from standing up for yourself, even when everyone calls you heartless for doing it. The beach house wasn't about money. It was about legacy and trust and the understanding that some things aren't for sale, regardless of their market value. Sarah learned that lesson the hardest way possible. I learned that family doesn't excuse crime, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold someone accountable for their worst impulses, even if that accountability destroys whatever relationship you had left. Especially then. This whole ordeal reshaped me, twisting my understanding of family, trust, and even forgiveness. I'm left wondering, what would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with a family member, knowing it was the only way to find peace, even if it shattered your heart? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.